I've made videos about the rune alphabet of the rug world, and now it's time to expand on that. Well, not exactly, but it's time to talk about magic and runes when used for magic. As usual, this is not about how this magic works, but more about how I created this magic and why I made the decisions that I made. Magic in this world exists in a few different versions, and I will cover them in a few different videos, but I'll focus on one at a time. This video is about one of two distinct features of vala magic. Valas are the priests of this world, chosen by a deity and given power from that deity. This power can be used in two different ways, and this video will cover the rune magic. The difference between rune magic and the direct magic is that the rune magic is used to create spells or charms that last for a little while, or a long while. The direct magic disappears once it's been cast, so it's used for things like healing injuries, lifting heavy things, banishing spirits or demons, creating light, or anything that doesn't have to last. The rune magic is made to protect someone for a longer period of time or create long-lasting light in a dark cave, holding up that heavy thing so it doesn't fall down later, and things like that. Each rune, as I've explained before, has its own unique meaning. It's a word, but also concepts surrounding that word. So, Tritha means war and peace, but it also has the meaning of opposites. Through these meanings, both the concrete and the abstract ones, Valas can create spells that last. It's usually used for things like protection, good luck, fertility, success, and stuff like that. As much as I would love to, I am not going to get into specifics for every single one of the 23 runes and how they can be used and for what and when and all that. I find it super interesting, but it wouldn't be useful for what I want this video to do. So instead, I'm focusing on some of the most common kinds of magic that are used in this story, at least so far. If you would like more information on each of the runes with their meanings and magical properties and so on, join my Patreon. Patrons get access to certain behind-the-scenes content on this and other subjects, as well as my eternal gratitude for supporting me and the channel. Click the link in the description if you want to know more about this. So, my main character, Ylva, is a vala who focuses on protection. She makes spells that protect people and places from things like bad luck, ill health, dark forces, and natural phenomena like weather. So, the most common rune that she uses is Vergi, which symbolizes protection and safety. That's fairly straightforward, but it is also somewhat vague. This magic system I'm creating isn't hard magic. I didn't want to ground it too much in physics and things like that, but I still prefer magic systems that are a bit more complicated than just using one rune and with that you can protect anyone from anything. Partially because you can't be protected and safe from everything, for several reasons. First, in-world, such a large request is greedy and would not be looked kindly on by the gods. There are no deadly sins in this world, but if there were, greed would definitely be up there. Second, the gods in this world are not all-knowing or all-powerful. They can't protect you from everything, and they would have no way of knowing what you considered good or bad, and what you want or need protection from. Third, if you were protected from everything, that would upset the balance in the universe. We're not going into detail about that now, it'll be brought up in a different video, probably several, but in this culture, balance is a big deal. Fourth, just from my point of view, there is the whole thing that if you're never sad, how can you appreciate happiness? I didn't want to have to deal with that. So each spell needs to be tailored a bit using other runes. For example, Vergi along with Samti would protect from sickness or injury. Again, not all sickness or injury, that's still too broad, but it's a start. Vergi with Tarn would protect not from sorrow as such, but rather from bad luck. Tarn is sorrow, but also all emotions, and paired with protection, it's understood you'd be protected from negative emotions. Although, if the spell isn't performed right, it might protect you from positive emotions too, which, would be bad. Those are two examples of Vergi with a rune that represents the things to be protected from, sickness or sorrow, but Vergi can also be used with more positive runes. Vergi with Shinitas or Mila, for example, would be used in a spell meant to protect a group, a family, village, and so on, and their relations. It might be used to try to ensure that any conflict in this group can be peacefully resolved, for example, without breaking the bonds of the group. Now, I want to note that these spells are not made to be complete or guaranteed protection or whatever they're meant to be, especially the spells that last for a long time. See, I call them spells, but in a way they're more like prayers. You're not demanding something, you're asking for it and hoping that the deity will grant it. Again, why I designed it like this is because I didn't want to create a world where anyone who had magic on their side would be invulnerable and have all good things in life, because that implies that anyone who is suffering is doomed to do that because the gods have decreed it so, and I don't like that. So, a spell that's meant to protect a person or a village or something would in fact be a spell that gently asks the surrounding forces to treat these people well. A spell for fertility, for the land or an individual, is an invitation for life to prosper here, and a spell for success in a certain endeavor is an encouragement to the spirits or forces involved in that endeavor to look kindly on the person's efforts. Some of these forces will listen, others will not, and what a person does will also affect things. If you want protection from injuries, you should not place yourself in dangerous situations. If you want your crops to grow, you have to plant and water them, and if you want to succeed at something, you have to put in an effort to do so. More experienced Valas who have a talent for casting spells might be able to make one that not only asks or invites certain outcomes, but actively nudges for them. But even this is no guarantee. Even if you have a charm with a protection spell against sickness on you, made by the most talented Vala ever, if you walk around exposing yourself to pathogens, eventually one will overcome the spell. It's more a case of that it'll be a bit less likely, you'll last longer than you normally would, but there's no way to be absolutely sure that all deities and spirits and just pure coincidence will be stopped from harming you because of the spell. The reason for this, behind the scenes, the reason I'm making this decision, is that I don't want there to be a way for a person to be completely immune to sickness or injury, because that comes with a whole host of complications. Say a town is guaranteed protection from invasion, but the invading force has a spell that guarantees them that they will win. One of these has to fail. Not to mention it would be kind of boring if that invading force always won because of this spell. From a story perspective, it would be great for them, but where are the stakes for the story? In the universe, the reason that spells are not guarantees is partially that the deities are willing to bend the rules of the universe up to a certain point, but not so much that they will break. Because breaking the rules of the universe is bad. Also, like I said, these deities are not all-powerful or all-knowing. They are powerful and knowledgeable, but they have flaws and personalities. Some are stronger than others, some get along and some don't. So if you're protected by one deity, there might be other ones that will try to mess with you just because. Now, getting back to the runes. I said that in order to create a spell, you combine 2 or more runes. Many more if you want a complex spell. The question is, with only 23 runes to combine, how will you be able to specify what the spell should do without literally spelling it out? Haha. Which I didn't want because that seems cumbersome. This is where the magic of the Vala themselves come in. The Vala who creates the spell must have a very firm grasp of what she actually wants the spell to do. The difficult part about creating a spell like this is keeping focus. The Vala must be channeling her deity's magic throughout the whole process and keep a very firm focus on what the spell is going to do. In theory, I suppose if the Vala is skilled or strong enough, she could just use one rune and focus her magic well enough to specify it, but I don't know if there's any Vala that actually can do that in practice. A combination of the right runes and the right focus is what's needed. This is because I wanted Valas to have different skill levels. It would be boring if every Vala could do anything just by asking their deity nicely. Making some more skilled at this than others opens up for interesting conflict in the story. So, you need the right runes, the focus, and the right materials. A general rule is that the longer the runes last, the longer the spell lasts. And to add to that, the more complex you can make the spell on the material, the better. The simplest materials you can use are ink on paper or chalk on stone or similar things. That's for spells that don't need to last super long. Say you need to sedate someone for a little while, or trap a demon somewhere until you've gathered the strength to banish it, or you're doing something dangerous and want protection for a few minutes. I said before that spells are no guarantee, especially the ones that last longer. Spells that only last for a few minutes might be more or less guaranteed, while spells that last for years are not. The reason for this is that it bends the rule of the universe more to, say, protect someone from harm their entire life than to do it for 5 minutes. So, while you still have to be truly exceptionally loved by a deity for a spell to protect you from burning alive if you jump into a volcano, you only have to be a little lucky for a spell to protect you from being pierced by arrows if you rush across a battlefield. Most of these short-term kind of spells are fairly simple, which is natural because why put a lot of effort into something that only lasts for 5 minutes? But they can be made more complex by using more runes or adjusting the way you write them, either the order in which you write them, or you can press harder or softer, making lines broader or narrower. That doesn't affect the longevity or strength of a spell, but can adjust nuances of what it focuses on. I'll get back to that. First, the behind-the-scenes reasoning as to why these short-term spells are more reliable than the long-term ones. It's mostly a matter of convenience. I've explained that I didn't want the long-term spells to be sure things because that would lower the stakes for the story. The short-term ones I feel can be more reliable because they are short-term. It's not, I will always succeed in everything I want to do, but rather for a few seconds or minutes, I will have luck on my side. Again, still not guaranteed to succeed, but far more likely to. Oh, and also you can't just keep a bunch of charms on you for when you need them, because a charm starts working the moment it's made, and even if you did keep using new charms to protect you over and over, eventually the deity won't listen anymore and the charms will be useless. Again, partially to remove the risk of someone cheating the system and using these short-term reliable spells to become invincible, and partially because it makes sense in the universe that the deities won't accept such behavior. Now, I said that you can add nuance to a spell by changing the thickness of the lines in the runes. Even more nuance can be added if you're using a 3-dimensional medium, like carving into wood or stone, or even tracing in sand or snow, although the former two will last longer than the latter ones. This is the most common kind of spell created with runes, usually in the form of runestones or carvings on houses and other structures, or as smaller charms carved into pieces of wood or stone that you would carry with you. Again, though, these are the long-term kinds that are not quite as reliable as the short-term ones. But on these materials, not only can you make certain lines broader or narrower, but also deeper or shallower. There is no hard and fast rule as to which runes or parts of a rune that you should modify to get a certain effect, because that will depend on the vala, their deity, and the relationship between them. This is one of the reasons why, once a spell is made, it's very difficult for an outsider to know exactly what it's meant to do. But I'm going to give you an example of a relatively complex spell, and I will use the example of a spell that protects a village from starvation. You'd probably start out with these runes: Vergi for protection, Samti for sickness, representing the starvation you want protection from, Shinitas for home, family, or Myla for togetherness, representing the village, the thing to be protected. You'd use Shinitas for a small village and Myla for a larger one. Those are the 3 basic ones, but you'd probably add at least a couple more. Tulsir, for example, to clearly make the point that this is not a demand, but rather a wish or a hope, something the people feel like they need. Or you could add Arkna, healing, if starvation is imminent and the tide needs to turn somehow in order for the village to be spared from it. Hoxa, fertility, if the village produces their own food as a blessing to their food sources to be plentiful. Or Yuti, gift, for generosity, if the village doesn't produce their own food but relies on trading, and so are dependent on the generosity of trading partners. At a 3rd level, 1 or more of these runes could be used. Grasta for success, either as a promise that the village will work hard on their own to starve off starvation, and or this rune can also be used to make the spell stronger. Vakur, potentially as a secondary spell to give the village strength in case starvation does come after all. This also shows that the village understands that a spell is not a guarantee. Ikvet, which means destiny and can be used in spells to make them last longer. Siv, which means day and night, or in this case represents a cycle, changes, and is used as a way to create continuity in a spell and make sure that external changes like seasons, for example, don't disrupt it. So those are the runes you might use. Probably not all of them, but maybe. Say the Vala chose these runes: Vergi, Samti, Shinitas, Arkna, Hoxe, and Grasta. Protection against starvation for the village, which needs their fields to recover to produce more food than currently or in recent years, and the village will work hard to take care of the fields to give them the best possible chance to recover. If the Vala wants to stress a certain part of the spell, say the fertility of the fields, then she might make Hoxe deeper than the rest of the runes. If she wants to stress that this spell should encompass all of the village, she might write Shinitas first to make sure that the other runes focus on that. If she wants to stress the promise that the village will work hard, she might make that rune larger than the rest of them. All depending on her style and what she knows that her deity will appreciate. You can make it even more complicated and carve different parts of the runes different as well, but I won't go into that except to say that the Vala has to be very good if she's going to pull that off. Because like I said earlier, it takes a lot of focus for the Vala to create this spell. As she's carving it, she needs to keep in mind exactly what she means for the spell to do. She must think about protection as she's carving Vergi, and starvation specifically when she carves Samti, this village and not a different one or her own family when she carves Shinitas, the fortune that needs change with Arkna, which fields Hoxe should target, and she must believe that the village will in fact put in the hard work that Grasta promises. That's a lot to keep track of, while also carving runes correctly and channeling magic, which in itself is not without difficulty. Again, I made it this complicated because I want magic to be complicated. I don't want it to be an easy out for any kind of problem, and I want it to be more complicated than most people would think. I like the idea of conflicts arising in the story because people don't understand why this Vala can't do the same thing as that Vala did, or why this other Vala can't promise that her deity will help them despite the great need they're in. I think of it a little bit like difference between different doctors or scientists. If you go to a skin doctor with a broken bone, they might not be able to help you, and if you ask an astronomer about botany, you might get nothing but a blank stare. In the same vein, if you ask a Vala of a healing deity to fix your broken bridge, maybe the healing is only people or creatures and not items, so that deity can't help with it. Add to that the fact that some Valas find runes to be far more trouble than they're worth, and choose not to deal with them at all, and perform all their magic by channeling the power directly instead, making them unable to create long-lasting spells. But that's the next video in this series. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss it. Thank you for watching, be safe, I will see you next time.